My name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel. Now, one of the questions I've always been asked is how I grow the early beans. So I thought I'd go through the three real techniques that I've got for growing early French beans and runner beans. And they're in kind of priority order. So the best runner beans and French beans that you can get, really grow them in the polytunnel. And grow them in containers, because if you do that, then you can move them outside when they no longer need the heat of the polytunnel and they're not taking up any space. So that tends to be about June. So the second technique is to grow them outside, but grow them in bubble wrap tents, and I'll show you that as well. And the third technique is to grow them under cover in a low tunnel or something like that, so dwarf French beans in a low tunnel. And so I've got all three of those different techniques on the go at the moment, and I'll just take you through them. So unless you heat it, a polytunnel is not really enough. You really need something, an extra layer of protection. And I like these bubble wrap tents. I just wrap them around the canes, and I also kind of close them up at the top. And you can't see that now, obviously, because the beans are so big. But when I show you the ones at home, you'll see that they're nicely wrapped up, and that just keeps them extra warm at night. And that's because my polytunnel is unheated, and when I planted these, you're still getting some frosts. And you can actually see there's a little bit of frost damage on some of the early leaves, but of course all the new leaves are just fine, and there's no chance of frost now. Now, if we did have a kind of freak frost in May, then I would just wrap the top part of this either in bubble wrap or fleece, and generally they'd just be fine, provided it doesn't go below sort of probably -2 or something like that. So they're the French beans, and they're looking pretty nice, aren't they? And these are the runner beans, slightly behind, but in the same little tent. And even now at this time, when it's actually quite warm and there's no risk of frost, the tent's actually, doing some good. It's keeping the soil a little bit warmer at night, and beans really like warm soil. And it sure is nice to see my very first bean flowers. So then these are the ones in the back garden. So these were the spares from the ones that I planted in the polytunnel. And you can see that these are nowhere near as far on. But because they're outside, the tents are closed up, and so they've only got these vent holes at the top. And I'll just open those up in a minute and you can have a look inside. And this is a fully closed one because this has got a squash in it. And then this is another bean a little bit further behind. This one did get a little bit of a frost damage, so I'll open these up in a minute. But I'll just show you. They're basically just tied around here at the bottom, and then I just use these clips just to crimp them closed. You can see in there really good growth on this, even outside. So these little tents do work really well. And as I said, these have had and withstood a frost in these little tents. And this tent was kind of slipping down the teepee a little bit, so I've just got a little bit of string and a clip here, which is just holding it up. And finally, I thought I'd just show you, these are up against a fence, and that's really useful because I've just had to spit a little bit of string here, which loops around the frame. It stops them blowing over in the wind. So they will blow over, especially if they haven't been watered and it's really windy. So just that little bit of extra support there, that's all they need, and then they'll be fine. So the second technique is to use one of these polythene low tunnels, and you can see I've still got quite a few low tunnels on my plot, and that's because of the peppers. So all of these low tunnels are all destined for peppers, but this one is for the beans. So I actually had beans in here, as you can see by these solitary little examples along the sides, and I planted those about 4 weeks ago probably, and normally that is fine. So early April, we're only getting quite light frosts at that time of year, and with a low tunnel and a layer of fleece, that's normally fine. But this tunnel we had a really hard frost in the middle of April, and it basically wiped these beans out. So I had to do an emergency sowing of new beans, and these are ready for planting now. And actually they're still going to benefit from this low tunnel because it's still pretty chilly at night, about 5 or 6 degrees centigrade, and there's still a cold wind, and so beans will really enjoy this little microclimate. 3 trays of beans. Most people grow their beans in root trainers. I'm only growing them in these tiny modules, and that's because I'm sowing them as really young plants really quickly. These are only about 2.5 weeks old, I think. And at this point, there's very little, they're not pot bound. You just tease those roots away a little bit and they're just going to grow away just fine. So I've got all my holes dibbed, and I do like to pre-water them all, and that just gives the beans a good start and helps to draw the roots down deep, chasing after that moisture. Now I don't normally like kneeling down, but I've hurt my knee. Too much time spent harvesting, squatting down and planting and weeding, so I'm suffering a little bit, so kneeling it is. And as I said, these are very young plants, so probably not every one of them will come out if it's with its module intact, and that's why I've sown extra seeds here, probably about 30% extra, and I've already had one that didn't come out, but most of them seem okay. Probably the one that didn't come out, it had a very underdeveloped root system, so you don't really want to be planting that one anyway, so this seems to be just fine. And these are Cupidon, these beans, from Real Seeds. And I'm very lucky actually that I had enough seeds, because it's not easy to get seeds at the moment, so having to do a double sowing, I was very lucky that there's a generous number in the packet. You might wonder why I'm sowing them with such a big space in between them in the rows, because I normally do everything equidistant, and what I've got here is, I think, about 6 inches in row and 8 inches that way between rows, and that's just because this bed's infested with mare's tail, and it just makes it just that little bit easier to weed it if I can get in between. So I'm really happy with those, and had almost no spares left, just a few. They're not fit for planting some of those, so I need to get that cover on. And now we can see my little Bluetooth thermometer in there. It's monitoring the temperature in here. There we go. So hope you like this quick video, and I should point out, I suppose, that if you like frozen beans, there's not a lot of point growing early ones, provided you've got enough freezer capacity. But from our perspective, we don't like frozen food very much, and we don't have enough freezer capacity, so early beans is fantastic. We're self-sufficient in veg, so we don't actually buy any beans, so we haven't had our last beans we probably had in October. So getting some nice early beans in late May is really nice for us. See you soon.